Okay, I'm back with another example of using the compare and bookmark feature of the product. This one is one I wanted to focus on because a lot of times we get questions from customers to say, is this really a problem or not? Like, is this something that's maybe a little bit of a false positive? So here's an example of how you can sort of quickly rule some of those things out. I've set up our performance budget like a lot of folks do on some basic measurements. Start render, fully loaded, first CPU idle, trying to get a good kind of sense of the entire user experience through 3 different metrics or something. So kind of pick these a little bit arbitrarily, but you can see I didn't see an increase in start render in this case. The budget's just fine. I didn't see an increase in my first CPU idle, still within budget. The big jump that we're seeing here obviously is for fully loaded time. So I want to look into that a little bit more. I'm going to go ahead and just go directly into the test this time. And you can see this is the test result that I want to investigate. Not a lot of things that I'm going to really know to look into at this point based on the fact that we haven't really done any kind of comparison, but I do want to go ahead and add a bookmark nonetheless, and you can do that directly from the home page. So I'm just going to call this after what's going on with fully loaded time. I'm going to add that. I'm going to jump back to my favorites dashboard, and I'm going to grab a point before this increase happened, and I'm going to go ahead and just bookmark from there. Call this after. Okay, I've gone ahead and I've added those 2 bookmarks. Again, if I jump up to the top of my dashboard, I can click on the bookmark tests and compare these 2 things. And again, I just quickly want to understand what's going on because it doesn't seem like I've been able to see anything else with my site that indicates that there's an issue. Here I can see no visual diff when I look at the film strip and compare the events in the timeline. Not a lot of big deltas, some changes, but quite honestly, a lot of them are slower for the original test. It had a faster fully loaded time, but nothing that I'm really looking into triaging. It's not until we get out here to the fully loaded time that we see that there's this big lump of time there between the fully loaded time and something like timed interactive or page fully loaded on that second test. I can see in my activity timeline right away here that there's something going on. There's this first test, the second test that I've got highlighted, the activity timeline in the bottom, there's just this little speck of activity that fired out here. So very likely what's happening is this test is just being pushed out by a request, like an API request or an analytics call or something that's delayed the loading, the fully load event from firing, because we need 2 seconds of inactivity in order for that to be considered complete. If I look at my budgets here, by the way, I can see for that first example, everything's within budget. Second example, same 11 seconds, it's out of budget. So there's obviously something different. But this is a nice way to visually compare your performance budgets between tests to see where there's been violations. And then going through popular metrics, don't see anything really sticking out there. We're not tracking fully loaded time as a popular metric. But when I'm looking at all of my metrics down the list, you can really see the big one that jumps up and sticks out is just that fully loaded. Everything else really doesn't seem to be too bad in terms of percentage change, except for the fact that some things have actually gotten faster, which is a great thing to see. So looking at common requests, not a lot of differences here relatively. Yes, 464% is a lot, but this gives us context here to say, look, 80 milliseconds compared to 14 milliseconds, not really perceptible and not really what we're going after for finding this problem. Same thing with unique metrics. Nothing pops out as being something that's delaying by that much from a duration perspective or long tasks or the size of things. So moral of the story is nothing's really changed at all with this site. Even the video analysis kind of shows that the site that we're measuring that's had the slowdown and fully loaded is actually loading and rendering a little bit more quickly than the previous example. And there's been no change in our desktop setup. So we're kind of at that point of like, all right, nothing seems to be a problem. The only thing that seems to have changed is the metric and this tiny little speck of activity here. So if I look in and look at the actual waterfall for this test and click on it, I see the same thing kind of confirmed as I scroll down here. Nothing's really changed. Oh, here we go. Here's one request that was added. This request was a realm analytics tag that fired very, very late in the loading. So might have been a timing issue with the script that changed things where this fell right within the window. It delayed the fully loaded time. The biggest question I think I'd be asking myself is, hey, is this really a metric that we care about tracking? Is this really something we should be looking at if it indicates these types of false positives that aren't necessarily something that are going to be problematic for our users? So that's how you kind of quickly get to mean time to innocence when looking into a regression that isn't necessarily a regression, and can kind of help you better tune the metrics that you are setting performance budgets for and that you consider vital for your organization. That's it for this example. Thanks.